Welcome to this week's edition of the Belau Report. I'm Jane Belau. An election special, a 1-hour special. We have 4 candidates for the 2 Senate seats, one for District 25, which is Judy Oley and Dave Senjum, and for 26, Carla Nelson and Ken Moen. And these are the people that you should pay attention to, that you should consider, and you should be grateful to for both the race and then the job for whomever is elected in November. And we're going to take District 26 first with Senator Carla Nelson and challenger Ken Moen. And Ken, we're going to start with you and ask you for an opening statement, if you will.
Thank you, Jane. Happy to be here, by the way. I'm Ken Moen. I'm running for state senate. I've not been a politician in the past. I'm a veteran. I'm a trial attorney in Rochester for 35 years. I decided to become involved as a candidate because the state shut down last year. If you recall, that's because the legislature could not agree on how to balance the budget. So the legislature as a group decided to borrow from our kids, our schools. Current payback is $2.4 billion. I can't see a real plan on how we're going to pay that back. Also, they bonded the future proceeds from the tobacco settlement, sold the bonds, and spent the money. So we don't have that to fall back on. Thirdly, the legislature actually indirectly raised our local real property taxes. Now, they don't have an actual vote on what the city and county raised for taxes here, but they reduced the amount of money sent back to local government, causing a necessary increase in real property taxes. My opponent, Senator Carla Nelson, voted for all of those things. I'm endorsed as a Democrat. I'm a moderate. I really think we need to work together to solve these problems. We need to send people to St. Paul that are actually looking to find common ground. I would like to be that senator. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ken Moen, would you share with our viewers your background as how it relates to the office?
All right, well, I'm a Minnesota boy, I guess. I went to college at the University of Minnesota, went into the service in 1967, served until mid-1970 in the Army. Came out of the service and went to law school at the University of Minnesota on the GI Bill, by the way. After that, I came down to Rochester in 1977. First came to the city attorney's office. So you get involved with a little municipal politics at that level. I went into private practice in 1980 and have been doing that ever since. My area of practice, it gets me involved with municipal, county, township, state governments constantly. I represent individuals who deal with government on a regular basis, and I've focused my practice on problem solving. I've been a trial attorney, and most of those cases, I would say 95% of those cases, actually settle before you get to a trial or a jury. That's a lot of negotiating. That's good training for what I think we'll be facing at the legislature.
What motivated you to run at this particular time in your career?
Well, I guess it had to do with being around politics an awful lot, never being a candidate, but looking at what was happening at a state level and having it mirrored at the federal level. It made me want to get involved. I thought, we need to send people up there with common sense, negotiating skills. For goodness sakes, we can't shut the state down because we can't agree on how to balance a budget.
In your opinion, what is the biggest issue facing the state of Minnesota right now?
Well, it's got to be the budget. If we continually go back to borrow from our schools to balance a short-term state budget, we've got real problems. That's our future. We have to protect that. What I would like to do is stabilize what we give to our education so that they can properly plan and budget. And that, I think, is the biggest difficulty we're facing right now. We need a structurally balanced budget. That means deciding what services and infrastructure we really need and being honest with ourselves. We've got to pay for it.
What is the issue of the greatest importance to the constituents in the district?
Well, I'm hearing a lot. I've been door knocking since mid-May, and I hear a lot at the doors. Education is a real concern. People are concerned that our schools are overcrowded. I think we're underfunded. Certainly we need stability in that funding so we can plan ahead year to year and we know what we're getting. The same thing is true on the infrastructure side. The City of Rochester is funding its capital improvement projects at about $3 million a year, excuse me. We really need about $5 million. But the state is not sending enough money back to local government so that we can properly do that. This is going to be a long-term problem. I think we need to address it. And we can do this through bonding. At a time when labor is hungry, if you will, and interest is low, this is the time to do it. We're going to have to do this in the long run anyway. We should be doing it more aggressively now.
How do you approach solving that problem?
Well, it's part of the budget process. We have to free up more money to send to cities and counties to deal with their infrastructure needs. It means at a state level, we cannot continually balance our budget on the backs of our municipalities and our counties and our schools. We're going to have to do a better job at the state level to find funding to free up for things that we really need. And the Republicans, as I've seen it, refuse to consider any form of new revenue. I think we have to add revenue to the equation. Nobody wants to raise taxes, but we have to properly fund what we really need. We could do it through reductions in tax expenditures, for example. Those are loopholes, credits, and so forth that creep into the tax code to encourage people and businesses to do certain things. Those ought to be carefully reviewed. I'm sure we've got savings to find there. You may have to look at additional forms of revenue. Put it all on the table. Let's consider a broadened sales tax, for example. Governor Dayton came up with a couple of proposals. I could accept those proposals. They didn't get anywhere with the Republican-controlled legislature. That's one of the reasons I'm running.
Why would you be the better of two candidates for this position?
Well, I really do approach it in a bipartisan manner. And I know that my opponent has claimed many things about being bipartisan as well. But quite frankly, I've looked at her record. And on every important issue, she sides with the Republican caucus right down the line. And that means not considering new revenues. It means shutting down the state, if that's what it takes to avoid that problem. She's had some bills that I've specifically opposed. She proposed a bill on moratoriums that would limit controls of local government. She has spoken against anti-bullying, but she voted against the only legislation that was presented. So there are a number of issues why I think I would be a better representative. I'm certainly willing to work across the aisle, and I have a lot of negotiating experience.
Ken Moen, I'm now going to turn to the incumbent, Senator Carla Nelson. And Carla, will you give us an opening statement, please?
Jane, I'd love to. I really want to thank you for hosting this forum today. I think it's critical, especially in our form of government, that we make sure that people have all the information they need about the candidates. And as Winston Churchill said, democracies get the kind of government they deserve. And so this is an important way for people to know about the difference in visions and leadership between my opponent, Ken, and I. We've had about 8 forums and debates so far. I've attended them all. I think Attorney Moen has been to 4 of them. I'm glad that there's an additional opportunity here. We have 2 more opportunities as well, and I think that's important. I'm a wife, mother, small business owner, former teacher here in the Rochester Public Schools. I've been privileged to represent this Senate district, which is a very diverse Senate district from very small cities rural areas to one of our state's largest cities and more of a metropolitan area. And it's that diversity of our district, I think, that has made me a good senator. I have a wide variety of endorsements from very diverse groups, whether it be ag, labor, business, education, police, fire, farm bureau, and I think that's what we need as a senator who is going to continue, as I have, to represent the needs of this district.
I know you've included some of your background, but why don't you refresh for our viewers the background that's specific to the office?
Well, as I mentioned, I think having a small business background is critical. Certainly small businesses are the largest employer in our state, so to speak. And also, I believe having an education background as a Rochester teacher and the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee has been critically important as well. And as you might know, I've served on I've been appointed by Governor Dayton to 2 of his commissions. That would be the Capital Commission, the Governor's Workforce Development Commission. I also have been appointed by Governor Pawlenty, very bipartisan, to 2 commissions as well, the Higher Education Facilities Authority Board and the Capital Area Architectural Planning Board. In addition, I chief authored and had passed into law bipartisanly 21 of my bills signed by Governor Dayton. And as the Post Bulletin said, I had an amazing way to work through gridlock. And again, that's what we need in St. Paul, and I can pledge to my constituents, I will continue that bipartisan work. I will say that Attorney Moen did have his facts wrong as far as my voting record, and it's very public. I would encourage people to look at that. Certainly well documented here, front page of the Post Bulletin, that I voted against the health bill, actually the only Republican to vote against the Health and Human Services bill, because it contained some provisions that would be very damaging to our district in particular. I'm glad those provisions were removed as the bill came back. But so I just want to make sure that people are able to do their fact checking. And while we're on fact checkers, I should say people should check the facts too on Mr. Moen's property tax statements. All the fact checkers have proven that that's wrong. And in fact, DFL Governor Rudy Perpich, I'll just quote him, said property taxes are local, property taxes are local, property taxes are local. So that's kind of a canard to say that that's a state issue.
Why are you running for another term?
Well, I'm running for another term to continue what we started in 2011. When the voters sent me to St. Paul, our 2-year budget, that's what we operate on the state of Minnesota, is a 2-year budget. Our 2-year budget was $6.2 billion in the red. That means Minnesota government had promised $6.2 billion more cost than what the revenues were coming in or projected to come in. Currently, Minnesota management and budget shows that we have a $1.4 billion surplus. So the reserves have been refilled, the cash flow has been refilled, and there's more money on the bottom line. And I think that came through prioritizing services, making government more efficient and effective, but most importantly, allowing the private sector, allowing the economy to grow. And I think we need to continue that going forward, because we are going to continue to have budget challenges.
The biggest issue facing the state of Minnesota in the 2013 legislature?
The biggest issue is jobs, the economy, and then making sure we have a workforce, a well-educated workforce, to fill those jobs. I disagree with my opponent who said that he supports Governor Dayton's $4 billion tax increase. That would have been like throwing a wet blanket on our struggling economy. We need to keep more money into the hands of citizens and into the hands of our job creators. So again, I think it's having a favorable tax climate. Currently, we're 45th in the nation as far as job friendliness and tax climate. We cannot sustain having that low of rating. We also need to make sure that we have smarter and more efficient regulations, so we cut the red tape and help businesses stay here, grow here. We want our innovators to innovate here and commercialize here. Those are the type of things that I've worked on in the state Senate. Bills both on tax relief I have sponsored, and also bills on government efficiency and cutting red tape. And we need more of that.
The biggest issue affecting the constituents in your district?
as I said, the biggest issue is jobs. And we do not get jobs by continuing to tax our job providers and tax Minnesota citizens more. And in fact, I don't think we will have that type of challenge. Minnesota Management and Budget showed that the budget forecast is for a 6% increase. A 6% increase in revenues to the state of Minnesota. And we know inflation is well under that, at somewhat under 2. So I think this just shows that economic growth, expanding the economic base, is the way to keep Minnesota prosperous, not increasing the tax rates.
Why do you believe that you're the better of the two candidates to serve in this position after election in the fall?
I think I'm the better candidate for a number of reasons. One, I have a proven track record. I am a committed servant, proven leader, diverse in my endorsements and support from not only just across the aisle, but the variety of special interests, variety of particular groups, whether it be the agriculture. I've been endorsed by labor, National Federation of Independent Business said I'm a guardian of small business. Minnesota School Board Association called me a superhero of education. And so it's that variety that I think is important, and to have that type of broad-based support. And then my policies of economic growth and encouraging jobs. And of course, my professional experience as an educator. I can tell you that we put $150 more on the per pupil formula, more than it's been put on in a long time. We also added new money, literacy, laser focused on K through 3, which we know is essential to make sure that our kids can succeed in school and beyond. I sponsored the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation bill, making sure our kids enter school prepared and ready to learn. It's those type of experiences and track record that our citizens need going forward.
Okay, one more question before I turn back to Ken Moen, and that is, what would be your highest priority if you are returned to the Capitol January of 2013?
My highest priority will be what's best for this Senate district and what's best for the state of Minnesota. And I think that will be encouraging economic growth, encouraging job creation, keeping our taxes, not increasing our taxes, reducing some of the impediments to a competitive job climate, and then continuing to make those investments in education that are student-driven and that produce results for our kids, making sure that our kids graduate ready for college and career.
Okay, Ken Moen, what would be your highest priority if elected in November as of January 2013? You want to hit the ground running.
Okay. I think we need to, this is the budget year, not typically the bonding year. So we really need to focus on that. And we need to do it early in the session, because as we let things drift out to the very end, we do a pretty sloppy job. So I think we need to stabilize revenue that goes down to our local governments, because that does affect real property taxes. There's no denying it. We also need to stabilize the revenues that go to our education. This is our future. We need to treat that with respect. And in doing that, we have to get away from the ever-increasing trend to rely more and more on real property taxes. We are slowly taxing our senior citizens on fixed incomes. We're slowly taxing them right out of their homes. And we have to do better than that for our seniors.
Okay. Carla, I'm going to give each of you the opportunity to ask each other 2 questions, and more if we have time, but I think it'll be 2. And you may ask your challenger your question at this point.
Well, I found it was interesting, Ken, that you suggested that we increase state taxes so that we can send more back to cities and counties in, hopefully I think you meant, an effort to help them hold down property taxes. But the reality is that Olmsted County is a net revenue producer a net giver to the state of Minnesota. So we get back, maybe about 60 to 66 cents on every dollar we send to St. Paul. That's a documented fact. And our current property and records assessor spoke to that very issue. And so the question is, why do you think it would be helpful for the state of Minnesota to increase taxes on its citizens so that citizens in Rochester send more of their tax dollars to St. Paul? We fight about it a little bit and determine what percent to send back, because we are a net loser when it comes to the money that we send to St. Paul. So I can't understand why you think that would be a good idea.
Well, my goal is to stabilize those revenue streams to our cities, counties, and our schools. How we do it is up to the legislature, of course. You have to have enhanced revenues somewhere in the picture. You cannot cut your way out of this thing. I don't think you can tax your way out of it either. There's got to be some way we can work together to properly fund what we really need in terms of our local governments and schools. Now, how we actually get there is, it's complicated. You're exactly right. I'm not here saying, let's just raise more and more taxes for a middle class. That's certainly not my goal. If you recall Governor Dayton's proposal, though, it was a modest tax increase on the very wealthy. I think we need to create jobs. That will generate more money. But I don't believe in the Republican idea that you raise jobs simply by leaving more money in the pockets of the very wealthy. It hasn't worked. It isn't working now. So that's the answer.
Okay. Ken Moen, you have the opportunity to ask Carla Nelson a question.
Thank you. Carla, I know you've attended at least one session on anti-bullying, and I think we're both on the same position on that. It's a serious problem in our schools and indeed nationwide. We've had a very bad experience locally in Casson-Manorville, for example. I'm certain we're on the same side of that issue. Can you tell me why you voted against the only piece of legislation addressing it in your 2-year term?
Oh, I am really glad you asked that question, Ken, because that is a critical issue, and it has been very important to me. Very important, I think, to every Minnesotan and every parent. And I think there's been some a misunderstanding about that. The facts are there wasn't any piece of legislation. There was no anti-bullying legislation. However, there was an amendment that was thrown on the Senate floor to change our current anti-bullying law, which I have referenced on my Facebook page so people can read that. Anyone who knows how legislation is made, to just throw an amendment like that on the floor without having one hearing on it, without allowing one teacher or one parent or a single student or the school boards, it would have been extremely irresponsible. And that's what we call those gotcha votes that we so hate in politics. People who kind of throw those things out there to get the gotcha votes in the postcards. But there was never a debate, Ken. There was never any testimony. And it also was very premature. It didn't even make sense because Governor Dayton has an anti-bullying task force which just released its recommendations last month. But even its recommendations, Ken, do not contain the type of things that were in the Dibble amendment that was thrown on the Senate floor. So I am very glad for the opportunity to explain that. But I think, as you said, every legislator, every person in Minnesota actually understands how devastating anti-bullying can be. And I've talked with the researchers, I've talked with the person who sponsored the anti-bullying debate, and you know what they say is the best thing is bystander intervention is one thing, and then we also do need to look at our policy.
Okay, one quick question for Mr. Moen. And I say one quick question because we want to give you time for closing statements. For you to ask him.
Well, again, I believe that I want to know, Ken, why I agree with you actually that you think there needs to be a balanced approach to our budget challenges, because they'll continue. My baby boomers, the silver tsunami, we're pushing through the system. We're going to continue to put challenges on state government. So I like your approach that there needs to be a balance between reductions or cuts, as you might call them, and increased revenue and government efficiencies. And I want to know, why do you think that a 6% increase in state revenues is not enough to fund state government? Why do you think that, why are you continuing to push additional revenues to the state beyond the growth that we had last year and again, another 6%?
Well, I think this gets to a fundamental difference between us and how we're viewing the budget, because first of all, if you look at the last report from the Office of Management and Budget, it still projects a $1.1 billion deficit. Now, if we have 6% enhanced revenues, we've still got a projected deficit, because you're not looking at the expense side. You know what and I'm going to blame the Democrats as well. When you look at whether we're balancing a budget, we include inflation on the income side, and on the spending side, we ignore it. So if you look at the latest projection, latest available, is still a $1.1 billion deficit. We owe the schools, that's in the same report, $2.4 billion. If you add any assumption of modest inflation, that's about $1 billion on the expense side. So we're still about $4.5 billion in deficit. That's the answer to your question. It doesn't, a 6% increase doesn't really address where we need to be.
Okay, quick question for Carla and Allison, not too long an answer, and we'll go to the closing statements.
Yes.
I've seen your materials, Carla, that indicate, to be blunt, you're taking credit for reducing a deficit of $6.2 billion and converting it into $1.2 billion surplus. Isn't it true that before the Republicans took control of the House and the Senate and did anything, that the deficit had already been reduced to 5,000? And secondly, don't you concede that your numbers don't include the projected $1.1 billion deficit that I just talked about, and doesn't pay back the schools?
Again, a great question. I appreciate the opportunity to address that. Yes, you are correct. Not 500,000 or 500 million, but it was, the deficit did change from a $6 billion to a $5 billion deficit by the time I took office in January. But as we know, the budget is a 2-year budget, and you have to look at a budget when it starts and when it ends. So the numbers that I have given are exactly correct, but I've never taken credit for those. I've been part of that group, and our policies helped do that. But I would never say that it was all because of Carla Nelson. However, our policies helped encourage increased revenue and decreased expenses, which led to a budget surplus. And you can't deny that. Now, regarding the school delayed payments, I didn't like that either, and I want to be perfectly clear about that. That was part of the grand compromise. We gave the governor a budget that lived within our means. He vetoed that budget the day after session ended, and he required more money. And he wanted to increase, in addition to the $1.4 billion that the Democrats did 2 years prior, before I was in office, which is still on the books, by the way. That was the shift between the Democrat legislature and Governor Pawlenty. Governor Dayton proposed another $1.4 billion shift, and many of us said, we will not vote for that. And the compromise was to go with what the governor wanted, to increase that delayed shift, but to $700 million. So, but the funny thing is, Ken, that has never been included, in the 40 years that we've done this, which we shouldn't do it. So we have to be consistent in how we look at the numbers. The point is, we're moving in the right direction, and I think it was our policies that led us that way.
We're down to 1 minute closing statements at the outside, and Carla.
Yes. Well, again, it's been my privilege. I want to thank Attorney Moen for running. It is these different views that are important, I think, for the public to see. And I'll say that I've been endorsed by the Minnesota School Board Association, Superhero of Education, National Federation of Independent Business, Guardian of Small Business, National Carpenters Union, Northern Plains Carpenters Union, police, fire. It's that wide variety of endorsements, and now I ask for your endorsement on November 6th so I can continue to work for you.
Okay, Ken Moen.
Thank you. Well, this is a very important election, and you can see between the two of us there are many important differences. So I urge you to consider what we've all been saying. I view re-electing the incumbent as more of the same. Jobs are important. Jobs are very important. But the Republican approach to job creation is trickle down, and it hasn't worked and it won't work. We need more focused programs. I've already told you about what I think we need to do with education and revenues to city and county government. Those need to be stabilized. So we have serious differences. I think my approach will directly deal with our problems, and I urge you to vote and vote for me.
I want to thank Ken Moen
Thank you.
and Carla Nelson for your hard work in the campaign and your caring about the community in your district. And that's District 26, formerly District 30, to vote for one of the two on November 6th. Thank you. We'll be right back with the candidates, Drew Dioli and Dave Senjum, for District 25. Stay with us.